Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back live today with Alex Leech. Excited to have her here as the owner of her own company. And yeah, we're talking about the consulting services she offers. It's Alex Leech Consulting. She's a neurodiversity coach, consultant, advocate, and so much more. Welcome back today. How are you?
I am great, Jill. How are you doing?
I'm doing well on this beautiful fall day in New York. Now, you're based out of where specifically?
Toronto, just
Oh, so
across
it's
the lake. Across the lake.
So it's probably
Yeah.
the same temperatures, maybe a little colder than it is now. But happy fall. It's here upon
Thank you.
us. Could you share with our listeners and viewers a little bit about what it is that you do specifically?
So I am a neurodiversity specialist, which means that I work with families, and that means it could be parents and or tween teens and young adults who are neurodistinct, whether that is multiple diagnoses such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, learning disability. It falls under that neurodiverse umbrella. But I also do work with some families that are neurotypical because they have other challenges that are aligned with neurodiverse, but it is not an actual diagnosis. So anybody that has like a working memory challenge, maybe identifies as ADHD, basically anybody that feels that they're struggling, I work with in the family unit. It's all about family empowerment because we are not alone. Nobody's an island in a family.
That is true. Some people who don't have family may offer differ, but there's people like
Yes,
you, there's friends, there's support, there's community. So we just have to let
exactly.
them know family doesn't have to be blood related. It could be.
No, chosen family, and it's also extended family because again, we're not an island. So a lot of the challenges that, I hear from, my clients are maybe not as much actually within that nuclear family, but it has a lot to do with, grandparents, aunts and uncles, how how they fit in their also chosen family in their communities. So it is not just isolated to, one individual and how that happens with that individual in the home or outside of the home. It's much
Yeah.
more complex. Yeah.
Oh, and Alex, before we continue, just tell us how we can reach out to you.
My website is www.alexleech.ca, or you could email me at alex@alexleech.ca. If you can't remember that, you just remember alexleech.ca. All that information in order how to reach out and contact me or find out more information is actually on my website.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. So, what did you have in mind for us today and our listeners?
Talk about opportunities. But a lot of times when, we're talking about, um, you know, we're talking about a lot of the challenges and struggles, a lot of it's put in sort of this negative, or a lot of parents I hear, they feel like they're being told they're doing things wrong. And it's not that they're doing things wrong. It's about, when I'm working with my clients and I'm talking on the subject, it's about making opportunities to make a shift or to, say like upgrade or
Mm-hmm.
to optimize what is happening. Because it doesn't always have to be doom and gloom,
True.
right? But it is also not about perfection. So it's creating those opportunities, seeing what, for example, mental health, it's a big topic. It's a hot topic today. It should be a hot topic every day. But a lot of that is there's, a lot of families are feeling that there aren't supports there for them, right? And when you look into that institutionalized version of mental health, they may not have the funds or a provider, or it could be location. There's other opportunities there as well, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist, a social worker, a psychotherapist. For example, for me, I'm a consultant and coach and an advocate, and I have many, many designations. But it's not a therapist, but it is also lived experience with having regulated health professional accreditations at the end of that, right? So it's about looking outside the box as well, because sometimes it's not necessarily um, what a doctor would prescribe. It's also about having that opportunity to find what is that right fit for you, right?
Yeah.
Some of the families that I'm working with, they're just like, this isn't working, or
Hmm.
it's working, but not enough. There is a missing piece. So we bridge that gap. And then also, too, opportunities we're looking at. Um, I know I've mentioned before that many times before that no one is an island in a family or in a community, but it's also the opportunity when you are doing this type of work that I do with my clients. It's helping them find those opportunities um, to really enhance and strengthen that family dynamic. And a family dynamic,
Hmm.
there's so many moving pieces in that family dynamic. There's the like parenting partners, so the parent, whether you're married, separated, divorced, common law, but they're your
Yeah.
partner in parenting, right? And then there's that parent-child dynamic. And then if there's siblings, there's the sibling dynamic. So there's so many moving parts in that. And so a lot of families, we've been conditioned that here you have this diagnosis, here's the report, right? Now read it and go home. So yes, you've understood this, you've read it. Now you have you've signed up your child for therapy or certain classes. But now what? How does that play out for your whole family, right? Because there's that relationship, your child is dysregulated, and it's just not that child that's dysregulated in the family. It just everybody becomes dysregulated. So it's taking the opportunity to find out what does this
Yeah.
diagnosis mean for your family? What does it mean for your relationships? What does it mean how your family works and communicates together? Because um, it's so important when we are a unit. What happens here in our homes now, it has a ripple effect for
Yeah.
not only tomorrow, next week, but years from now. Because as parents, and I'm sure Julie, you can relate to this. Some of
Yes.
the things that maybe not keep you up at night, but it's always brewing in the back of your head about what is my life, what is my child's life going to look like when they are no longer a dependent? Every parent wants their child to be, you know, joyful and successful for whatever that
Hmm.
means for that child,
But
right? But,
the
you
stress and the
know,
worry of all that.
the stress
Yeah.
and the worry. So when you have a child that, has some executive challenging, challenges
Yeah.
or sensory issues and you see what's happening in the here and now, when the here and now is the opportunity to make a shift or um, to do a little bit of work together.
Yep.
So so the future is much more, it's less stressful, let's put it that way. And that we're talking about things like support versus enable, how we communicate, how we as individuals feel about ourselves, our own thoughts and
Hmm.
emotions and behaviors, and how that plays out with the family. And say, like, my family is a family of four and like three pets. So there's technically seven living beings in my home.
Yep.
But, like even the dogs are affected by how what's happening in my family dynamic at home. I'm sure it's very similar for yours and your family too,
Yeah. Well,
in some way.
we got the three of us, and then we lost our cat last year. We are actually on the hunt. We are going later today again to the shelter, which we did the other day. So
Mm-hmm.
we're on the hunt for more life, for more souls in the household, but different dynamics, different. Oh yeah, not always easy. No,
Mm-hmm.
but it's beautiful.
That's beautiful. So people say, what does that look like?
Hmm.
Right. And it really is, when I'm working with a family, and I say family because it's the parents that come to me,
Yeah.
one
Hmm.
or both. But I say it's a family affair, right? So whether it's one parent, two parents, they reach out and they say, my son or daughter is struggling or has been diagnosed with this, I'm like, okay, so we take all this, I take the opportunity, we both do, we make that time and we find out how this plays out, not just for the child, that we're talking about, but how it plays out for the whole entire family, right? Because a lot of that is you know, how does that, for example, in my household, if all the focus is at this one particular time is just say on my daughter, how is this affecting my son? How are my daughter's, meltdowns when she's stressed out? Is that affecting my son? How is that affecting me? How is that
Yeah.
affecting my husband, our family relationships? You know, so we look at that, right? So it's not just exactly what is it is that's in the report. It's how is this playing out? What do I want as a parent? This is the question I ask, what do you want as a parent for your child? What are your expectations? What are your
Yeah.
concerns? What are your challenges? What are your worries? What are the things that you celebrate? What are the things that you love about this, this situation or the diagnosis? So we look at all aspects of that, right? And then when I'm working with the, the child, usually a tween, teen, or young adult, and I also say, to the parents, before I work with your son and or daughter, there is a parent commitment, right? There is, like whether it's
Yeah.
you have a session, say every few months, to find out what's going on, how is it playing? Because a lot of the times, and this is not it's a gap that I find,
Mm.
right? I'm hearing that from my clients that their children, they go to, say, social skills classes or group classes, and they're learning all this, but then they come home, right? And they're bringing it home. The rest of the family wasn't there for that, for that session, that lesson. They don't really know what's going on, or they get a cold notes version, but they're not taught or have the opportunity to talk or about how this is affecting them. How can they help their child? How can this help the family? So that's what I do a lot. So it's all about family empowerment, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of questions come up, and it really sometimes there's sort of, you know, it's very similar in a lot of families, but it's always very uniquely to that one family because every person is different, especially every autistic individual is different. Just because you know one person with autism doesn't mean you know everyone that
Yeah.
has autism, because it is not a cookie cutter diagnosis, it's a spectrum. Anything on in the neurodiverse, sort of under the neurodiverse umbrella is a spectrum.
Interesting. Alex, remind us how we can reach out to you.
It's Alex at alexleech.ca is my email. And there is also www.alexleech.ca. That's my website.
Perfect. All right. We still got time in the show, but wanted to make sure we remind everyone. What else did you have in mind for us today as a neurodiversity coach, educator, and so much more?
It really is about, again, when we get to, opportunities, making those opportunities. What is it, because parents, a lot of it, they're, and I can speak for myself as well. As a parent, you're just doing the best that you can, and you're exhausted and overwhelmed. And so, what do you do when you are tapped out? You
Oh,
know that your child needs this help, or they're having another meltdown, and you just have nothing left in the tank, right? And you lose it, and you feel like a really crappy parent,
mm-hmm.
right? So my message is you're not a crappy parent,
Yep.
right? You are doing the best you can. So it's really important to have that, that empathy for self and that self-compassion for yourself. Because a lot of times we as parents, we're so selfless when it comes to our children a lot of the time. So we put all the emphasis on that and we forget about who we are or what we need. And it sounds like a big cliche, it's a cliche for a reason. But when you're in that airplane, when those
Mm-hmm.
oxygen masks come down, you must put it on yourself first
Oh,
in
yes.
order so you can help those that you love. And a lot
Yep.
of times as parents, I hear a lot of it. I'm so tired. I feel numb. I feel isolated. At the end of the day, I'm worried about my relationship with my partner because I'm just tapped out, or I just feel like I'm giving and giving and giving. And it's like, you are tired because you are giving,
Yeah.
but that's okay. So how are you as a parent going to fuel up? Yeah. So those are a lot of the things that I talk about with my clients.
And I mean, I know you mentioned you speak to the parents, but you also work with the children too as a family unit as well, right? Is it normally start
Yes.
with the parents first, I'm assuming? And do the sessions usually entail you with the whole family, or do you break off into with the child in a sense?
Well, a lot of it is, again, it really depends on what the parents want, right, for their child.
Yeah.
But they come to me because of their child. That's the first and foremost. So I listen and I listen and we set things up and I work with their child,
Yeah.
right? But then I also but that first session is 90 minutes with the parent. So we talk about the child, but we also talk about them and we
Yep.
talk about the whole dynamic. And then what happens next is I start meeting with the child. But I always, and everything is always confidential. And I do say
Yep.
to the individuals that I'm working with, that most of them are minors, but they're still
Got it.
dependents, even if they're like 18, 19, 21, they're
Yeah.
still dependents, right? So there is that confidentiality. And I do say, is there anything that other than the harm to yourself or others, right? That I am obliged and I must share. But is there anything that you would like me to share or not share with your parents? So the child feels it's they're also in control, right? Because a lot of times
Yeah.
too, they need somebody to speak to, that they're not worried about hurting their parents' feelings. Because children, a lot of the kids I hear is that not only are they confused and they have their own struggle, but they're like, I really feel badly that I'm autistic or I have all these because it makes it harder for my parents. So there's a lot of shame and guilt that their children are feeling as well. And sometimes parents aren't aware of that. And so I'm able to help bridge that. And I think probably about 90% in my practice, it's
Yeah.
one or the other, but I do work with the family together. It's very rarely that they want to have everybody there at the same time. Usually it's one parent with one child if it's a session with them together, right? But usually it's very identified. But I do check-ins, and they like it that they find it a very safe space having me as the bridge, not the
Yeah.
middleman, because I'm not reporting back and forth. Really,
And
what my job is, my mission is to bridge that gap.
oh, we clearly
Mhm.
love what you do and you're passionate. And
Oh,
just for the new time listeners, don't know a little about your background. Would you mind just explaining to them why you got into this?
initially I got into this because when my children were both being diagnosed um, with autism and their multiple diagnoses, I started also seeing similar patterns from my own childhood and realizing that this spans generations, right? And it also, in all the work that I was in advocating and work I was doing to help my children, I started realizing that there were gaps in the system. We are so blessed with a lot of opportunities that are out there, but nothing is perfect, right? And I'm finding that how I started building my practice and my business was from the gaps that I noticed as a parent, being a parent raising two neurodistinct kids who are now teenagers, as well as for myself, because there's a lot of services out there that are absolutely amazing, but they're not lived experiences,
Yeah.
right? So, that's my number one thing is when you have a child who is neurodiverse or identifies somewhere as neurodiverse, that you find somebody to work with who has the lived experience, not just the book smart,
Yeah. It's
because
good to have both
it
for
makes
sure.
all the difference in the world. I found that for myself. Yeah. And that's what I hear. Yeah. Do you have any
Beautiful.
questions, Jill? Do you have
Well,
anything that you'd like to ask?
I think I've told you about I have a nephew,
Mm-hmm.
right, who's been diagnosed. Well, I mean, the anxiety, the
Mm-hmm.
high level function in ADHD, and but they don't use the word autistic, but someone else did. But he's definitely special in a good way. And
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like my sister, she's really kind of in denial about it. Like we just finally he left the diploma program, so he's in what,
Mm-hmm.
10th grade. So he won't get a diploma, which is fine. He's going to do the career side of things, right? And he's doing career trading, and he's a wonderful soul. But I feel like it's hard to talk to my sister about it. And as
Mm-hmm.
a parent to parent, like, there's maybe anger, maybe hurt, denial,
Mm-hmm.
because I always say, well, what's exactly wrong? What's special? And when I start asking questions and
Mm-hmm.
he's, 16, it's like she doesn't want to talk about it. So is
Mm-hmm.
that normal to feel that way? Because I mean, she's my sister, you would think, but
Yeah.
I mean, you've gone through this, and I know you're personally, and you worked with people, but there's a come a point where I would assume it's good to talk about, to try to,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
handle people that are a little standoffish about their child being different? I guess is my
Oh,
question.
yeah. First thing I always want to say, different, not last. Hashtag
Yes.
different, not last.
Hmm.
But it's very isolating because it's very complex. Like you just, what you told me about your sister. I'm sure there are many things. Obviously, I can't speak for her, but there's the exhaustion. Like, oh, do I have the energy to talk about that? That is probably number
Okay.
one. Do I have the energy? But
Yeah.
two, it's like, oh no, it's another thing. What is wrong? Like there's that word wrong. What is wrong?
Wrong.
Yeah, what's
Oh,
wrong? And it's just like, oh, wrong. Everyone focuses on the wrong. That's all that I see, right? That's another layer. And then another layer is, could possibly be, it doesn't matter what I say, I don't want to get into it because, you do feel very protective
no.
and very raw at times, right? And a lot of times, families, the extended and our friends and family, and I will speak from personal experience. I love my parents very much, and they're amazing grandparents, but they're still on a very spiky learning curve all of the time, right? Because well, when I was a kid, or this is, what happened. She said, well, that was you at that point in time. This is now and your grandson and or daughter in this time. And then don't forget there was a whole other generation in between that was
Yeah,
me,
I know
right?
a lot of people like
So
that. Yeah, it's
so there's these
right back to them and their.
yeah. And as expectations, and there's a lot of expectations that, are out there that are unwritten. And even as a parent, we have certain expectations. And then when we see our children not reaching those expectations, what do you do with it? There could be frustration, there could be, resentment, and it may not even be with their child. It could be, a lot of it's situational, right?
Yeah.
And there's also this, I've had, many moments where there's resentment that comes up,
Yeah.
you know, and that as a parent is really hard. You're not resenting your child, but you're resenting the situation.
Hmm.
And you know, luckily I had some great people in my life that helped me, and a lot of my training and also with that neuroscience background that I have, and my own research that I've been doing to create my practice. There's a lot of there's there's that, how do I shift and move through that, because our kids are smart, our kids know. And I have no problem sharing this. One of the worst, the most devastating moments in my life as a parent is when my daughter was 5 years old, and she could see that I was frustrated with something else not even related to her, and she looked at me and she had these tears pooling in her eyes, and she said, "Mommy, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "Why? What's wrong?" She said, "I'm sorry, I'm autistic. I see it's really I see you and daddy arguing, and I know a lot of it's about me."
Oh,
And this is coming from a kid that's like, 5, 6, and it broke my heart. And that was a
the
massive
turning
moment,
point.
a
And
massive turning point, that it was like, I'm trying not to swear.
Oh,
It's
it's
like,
okay. You can.
bleep. It's like, shit,
Wake
you
up.
know?
Like, wow, I
Like,
have to.
it was a huge wake up. It was like, my kid sees what I'm going through, and I think I'm hiding it from them. I'm not.
Yep.
They are so smart. So when I'm talking about family dynamics and I'm talking about all this, that's why I said it's not just the child that is neurodiverse or neurodistinct that is going through stuff. It's everybody,
Yep.
right? And from that moment on, I have been working so hard as a parent to try and not erase that memory because it's a benchmark for me,
Yeah.
right? But trying to take that moment and learn from it. And and this is also why I'm so passionate about it too, because if it's happened to me, I know it's happened to other parents. And if I can help another family not go through that, or shift, or flip the script for whatever is happening in there, so that
Yeah.
family is healthier as a unit. I would be so happy. That's my
I
mission.
apologize. We're out of time, Alex.
I
How can we
know.
reach out to you? Would you mind sharing?
It's alexleech.ca.
Perfect.
So that's my website, and my email is alex@alexleech.ca.
All right. Thank you so much. Pleasure having you here as always. And we'll talk soon, okay?
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.